A new bombshell from Democrats in Missouri. Republicans in the Senate have drafted an amendment to ban women for life from accessing Medicaid if that woman has ever had an abortion. This comes as lawmakers debating an abortion bill currently before Missouri's Senate blocked Democrat-proposed amendments that would permit abortion in cases of rape or incest.
Meanwhile, two studies cited by plaintiffs and a federal judge in Texas that purported to show the harms of the common abortion pill Mifepristone have been retracted by the publisher of the scientific journal they first appeared in. Sage Publications said it retracted 3 studies about the abortion pill, 2 of which were cited heavily by Judge Matthew Kaczmarek last year when he sided with a group of anti-abortion physicians and revoked the Food and Drug Administration's 2-decade-old approval of the pill. So very fascinating. I think, the lack of ability for people who are making laws to understand scientific research is a huge problem in all of policy making and legislation passing and deciding on cases that are of extreme importance. But what's going on in Missouri seems to be something that is pursued by people who are the kind of anti-abortion politicians that are willing to do just about anything to take away women's access to abortion. You have politicians in Missouri making this sentiment that when there's a case of rape, they said we could pursue the death penalty of the rapist, but there's an innocent life caught in between, and that the innocent life, the baby, should not be punished, which is just an insane thing to hear as a woman, because was the woman who was raped not also innocent? And should she have to carry, her rapist child to term? There's really extreme positions, and the way abortion is going in a lot of these states is in the direction where public opinion is not in support. And so it's a really difficult situation because we have such low local election voter turnout, especially in off years when there isn't a presidential race or major congressional races. And that's when you have a lot of these legislators getting elected that are going on to push policy that is extremely unpopular and in some cases very dangerous.
No, you're absolutely right, Jessica. And what we've seen thus far is when these ballot measures come up, and they've come up in state after state across the country, it has increased voter turnout to push against anti-abortion policies. Quite frankly, women want to have the right to choose. And when we talk about a drug like Mifepristone that has been on the market for decades, that has shown efficacy, that is shown to be extremely safe, that is shown to be used in cases of emergency abortions for health reasons, that is shown to be cases for other reasons related to abortion as well. This is very interesting to me because we've seen time and again Republicans push against late-term abortion, which, by the way, is less than 2% of abortion cases and only happens when the life of the mother is at risk and the child is not viable. But in this case, and when we're talking about Mifepristone specifically, this is a drug that you can only use within the first few weeks of pregnancy anyway, and one that has been used safely and effectively for decades. So any bit of research that is newfound that says otherwise is quite frankly lying anyway. But beyond that, Missouri, it's shameful. It's shameful because we've seen, again, state after state. We just saw in Virginia, what was that, a couple months ago at this point, where they tried to slide in an abortion ban that was supposed to be a more humane one that focused on cases of rape and incest, and that fell flat as well. Voters don't want to see abortion bans. And what we're seeing with the demonization of Mifepristone is that Republicans are trying to slide in whatever way they can an abortion ban. This piece of legislation goes even further because it also bans women from Medicaid for life. For those who do not know, Medicaid is a health program, a health insurance that allows for people who are at or below the poverty line to be able to access health care. That means doctor visits. That means routine health care. That means your annual checkups. If you're a woman, that means your mammograms. It means your woman care when it comes to making sure that you are not at risk for things like cervical cancer or any uterine issues. This is a huge deal. To restrict a woman from access to health care who is already living in poverty, because that's the only way you can have access to Medicaid anyway, is one of the most detrimental things you could possibly do. They are absolutely fine with women dying. That is what this type of legislation will ensure.
Absolutely, especially when we consider the recent case out of Texas. Now, Missouri's law is that abortion is accessible, or rather, I will say abortion is illegal unless there is a case where it's demonstrated that it's an absolute emergency not to delay any further, directly to the mother's life. Now, in the case of Texas, there was a physician that did say, yes, the mother's life was in danger. Having this baby carried to term would endanger future pregnancies as well. This is a case where it is a medical emergency. And then you have the Texas courts ruling that it is not. Why would a judge or a prosecuting attorney know more about women's health than her doctor? So even this legislation, that seems clear cut. That seems okay if it's in the case of an emergency, the woman will be able to access an abortion. It's not that clear cut, especially in practice in these states where the judges deciding on these issues will never have to face this decision themselves. Oftentimes they're men, and oftentimes they're conservative and they're anti-abortion. And I want to go back to that quote. It's from the state senator Rick Bratton, who's a Republican from Harrisville, Missouri. He said, if you want to go after the rapist, let's give them the death penalty. Absolutely, let's do it, but not the innocent person caught in between. That's an insane thing to say in reference to a baby in this case. And I want to go back to the Food and Drug Administration trying to revoke access to that pill. The Food and Drug Administration should not be a political entity, but so frequently it is. And there's so much lobbying around the Food and Drug Administration, what drugs ultimately, get passed, what drugs are accessible to Americans. There are a lot more precautions taken in Europe. There's a lot of food or additives in the food in America that would never be on the shelves in other countries. And it's simply because of this kind of lobbying and political persuasion, this time on literally false science, in the direction of making a drug that is safe not accessible. But it's also been the case that very dangerous drugs are made widely available and overprescribed because these pharmaceutical companies are paying doctors to push them. In the case of the epidemic around opiates, you have double-blind studies done as randomized controlled trials out of Harvard University, one of the best medical schools we have, saying that a combination of ibuprofen and acetaminophen, which are not addictive, are just as effective at managing pain as morphine is. And yet we still have morphine being more frequently used and prescribed in a case where someone's hospitalized and released from the hospital with injuries. It's just disgusting that this agency that's supposed to protect us is not protecting us, and it's because of political incentives or oftentimes monetary incentives going the other way.
I agree with you on that. And I think that at this point, we have seen so many conservatives in multiple states across the country and jurisdictions push against abortion rights only to be squashed at the ballot box time and time again. Not being able to stay out of women's bodies, uteruses, and business seems to be something that Republicans can't get over. And I would argue that at this point, even with certain restrictions or with certain elements of ways to or workarounds when they talk about elements of rape and incest, what we've seen is that the decision makers are the lawmakers. It is not the woman. It is not her doctor. When we talk about the risk of life to a woman, that should not be decided upon by legislators. That should not be decided upon by judges. I do not trust my health to them. I trust it to the physician that I am seeing. And what we're seeing across the country is that, quite frankly, even in laws that people think may work in their favor, as in the example you used in Texas, Kate Cox thought that she fell within that, that she was going to be able to get an abortion safely because of the risk to herself that carrying that pregnancy to term that was no longer viable posed. It absolutely, she was ruled against in that case. So, and not everyone's going to have the financial wherewithal that Kate Cox did to find an abortion in a different state. So I think that we do have to take these things into consideration. And I, for one, am happy that women, as well as some men, are going to the polls and showcasing just how important this issue is to them.
Yeah, and in the case of Kate Cox, she had kids. This is not the kind of narrative that's been pushed by a lot of conservatives in the United States of America, that it's just young people being reckless. Pro-abortion is not a thing, and abortion is a decision you make when you're in the type of situation where you're deciding whether or not you're carrying this baby to term, whether or not the baby is viable is a huge consideration. And Ms. Cox wanted to be a mother. She wanted to have this baby, but the complications would actually put at risk her ability to have future children. it would be a pro-life decision to have the abortion when she did because the baby was not viable, and not everyone has the means to travel to another state. But I think just the fact that women can, and the fact that women can seek out unsafe abortions not done by medical professionals, and that abortion will always be something that's present when it comes to medical care in the United States and in the world. And when we consider that, is abortion going to be safe and accessible, or are you going to make it inaccessible? It will still happen, but it will just be less safe. That's really the decision that, states are facing here when they're passing this legislation. And it seems that they don't know that that's really the decision that's being made. I went to Kentucky when they had one of these ballot initiatives that you mentioned earlier, Ameshia, that really did boost voter turnout. And I talked to people who are Christian, who identify as pro-life, and they said, you know what, I believe it's really between a person and God, and I don't think Kentucky should be one of the states that bans abortion. And it was amazing because all of these narratives from people who are pro-life that we see in media and we see espoused by these politicians are not representative at all of the pro-life population in the United States of America. Most people, especially those identifying as conservative and pro-life, had very nuanced things to say. And most people in the United States are are pro-abortion rather, up to a certain amount of weeks. And it's been the case that there's a narrative that women are having post-term abortions and extremely late-term abortions and abortions after the child is born. It's just all false, and it's all garbage meant to manipulate people. And actually, the average American is far more reasonable, even those that identify as pro-life.
Nothing but facts on facts there, Jess. That does it for us this week on Rising. Jess, it was great hosting with you today.
Yeah, it was to be with you, Ameshia. Nice treat to have the two of us together.
Such a great time. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.